Matter of fact, tonight, our own Ed Byler is going to give us a talk about a Confederate guerrilla with Bert Hayes.
Bert Hayes.
Bert, Ed, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, John. As I told Kitty on the way over here, I don't know if I remember enough to tell this program. Just this morning, I found another 250 pages of material that I did not go through. So sometime later, I'll do a revised. You're going to have to listen to me read this thing because I can't remember from 1 minute to the next what I want to say. To quote one of our good friends that wrote Booger Saga, Dr. Maurice Wade Pruitt, war is hell, but rebellion or civil war is hell plus destruction for the losers of the rebellion. This can be taken as a warning to future generations. The American War of Rebellion, or Civil War, between 61 and 1865 decimated the southern states and killed and wounded thousands of people, both soldiers and civilians. This program is based on 40 years of correspondence on my part and what scant official records which have survived and have been recorded and published. There ain't much in the way of the official record, but there is a ton of folklore remembered and retold by descendants and survivors. But it must be remembered that folklore can change and become distorted the further down the line of generations the individual is. There will also be a lot of genealogical information in this program because that was my primary thrust in doing the research. I am not a Civil War historian. I wish I were. Greg pointed that out to me last week at the SAR meeting. Much has been written and told about his guerrilla activities in Hardin and Wayne County, Tennessee areas, as well as in the counties of Northwest Mississippi, Alcorn, Prentiss, Itawamba, and Tishomingo, and in Lauderdale County in Northwest Alabama. However, these tales must be considered hearsay. Don't have any documented record of who he killed, who he robbed, or who he tortured. Just merely folk tales. And there was a great deal of animosity after the war between the survivors on both sides of the war. The war continued for several years after the war had actually ended, the actual conflict. So this thing will consider folklore as well as the official record. Captain William Berton Hayes was born on July the 2nd, 1836, in the Cypress End community of Wayne County, Tennessee. His father, Wallace Hayes, had been born about 1792, we believe, in Wilkes County, North Carolina. Bert's mother's name is unknown at this time. It is thought by some of the descendants that Wallace's first wife was of the indigenous people, part of Chief Colbert's tribe. Wallace Hayes himself is an interesting character. We believe he moved with his parents to Smith County, Tennessee about 1800. His older brother, John Hayes, Sr., had moved further west and set up a homestead in the Chickasaw lands in what is now Wayne County, Tennessee in 1806. He was evicted by federal troops in 1808 following the Treaty of 1806 and settled in Hickman County. When the area was opened for legal settlement, Wallace, accompanied by his older brother, back to the 1806 homestead lands. Both entered lands under the entry laws of Tennessee and remained in the area along the old Natchez Trace on the west side of Cypress Creek. It was here in the cane breaks along Cypress Creek that Bert Hayes was raised. Wallace's first wife died in 1848, and on 13 March 1850, in Wayne County, Tennessee, he married the widow of Caney Cockburn Jr. of Lauderdale County, Mrs. Lucinda Cantrell Cockburn. She had been born on the 25th of June, 1803 in Spartanburg, South Carolina, and had come to Lauderdale County in about 1818 or 1819 with her parents, John and Mary Westmoreland Cantrell, settling on land on Butler Creek near the later community of Pruiton. Lucinda married Caney Cochran Jr. on the 5th of June, 1826 in Lauderdale County, probably at the old Butler Creek Baptist Church, which was founded in 1817. They were a fairly wealthy family, Caney Cochran Jr. In his estate settlement, there are numerous slaves mentioned, a great deal of furniture, and a great deal of silver and gold utensils, and quite a bit of money. Wallace, I'm sure, was tickled to death, but they had a marriage contract, which is recorded in the deeds of Wayne County, Tennessee, which kept the estates strictly separated. Wallace maintained control of his money, property. Lucinda maintained control of hers, and they did not merge. But it was through Bert's father's marriage to Lucinda that Bert and his older brother Lawson Hayes became familiar with the Cantrell family. And that plays an important part in what happened during the war. James Wesley Cantrell, who was a brother to Lucinda Cochran, was born in 1800 in Spartanburg County, South Carolina, and had married Thurza Thornton, the daughter of Josiah Thornton, a Revolutionary War soldier from Virginia. They had settled in Wayne County, or Lauderdale County, because it's right on the state line, in 1818. He married Thurza in Lauderdale County in 1823. James Wesley Cantrell had entered land along the west side of the Tennessee River, south of Pittsburgh Landing in 1840. His older brother Lenore Cantrell, who had also married a daughter of Josiah Thornton, Eleanor Thornton, in 1824 in Lauderdale County, moved to Hardin County about 1840 and settled on a farm in the Walnut Grove community, going up Highway 69 to Savannah. When hostilities began between the Southern sympathizers and the Northern sympathizers in 1861, both Bert and his brother Lawson volunteered for service in Company G, Wilson's 21st Cavalry of the Confederate Army. Bert enlisted on 12 October 1861 at Savannah. I don't have an enlistment date for Lawson, but he was later promoted to second lieutenant, but the commission was never finalized before he was captured by Union forces. He was imprisoned in Rock Island Prison, where he died the 20th of July, 1863, listed as a second corporal, and he is buried at the prison cemetery in grave number 2120, CC. Prior to his capture, Lawson's capture, Bert was apparently transferred to the Company H, 21st Cavalry, at or shortly following his enlistment. Several of his brothers-in-law and stepbrothers also served in this company. The Battle of Shiloh definitely affected Bert and the rest of the family. James Wesley Cantrell, father of Bert's wife Thurza, had died in 1858 and left his son John Nelson Cantrell the part of his farm where the Battle of Shiloh took place. John Nelson Cantrell owned the battlefield known as the Peach Orchard, as well as the George Mance cabin, and the spot where General Albert Sidney Johnston was shot and later died. After being shot, the troops moved Johnston's body into the pig lot there at John Cantrell's house, and he bled to death there in the pig pen. Both Bert and Brother Lawson saw service during the Battle of Shiloh and later in the Battle of Corinth. It was after the Battle of Corinth that, according to family tradition, Bert met with General P.T.G. Beauregard and stated, "General, they're stealing us blind." According to the traditional conversation, General Beauregard supposedly said, "Take 50 men of the best men and go home and defend the folks at home. Give them hell." Whether that actually happened, I don't know. I do know that he did supposedly meet with General Beauregard following the Battle of Corinth, and Beauregard detailed him and Company H to act as a guerrilla group to harass and fight all of the Union sympathizers and Union forces that should come through the area. Now, he didn't have an army. He only had 100 and something men. And most of them had grown up as his neighbors, and they're in Hardin County. And this generated a lot of conflict with some of the family members that were Unionist. I don't know when Bert went rogue, so to speak. It may be after his mother, his stepmother and father were tortured by Union soldiers in late 1863, early 1864. But his stepmother was hung in her kitchen of the house, although it did not kill her. In fact, she lived another 40-something years after the battle, after the war. Died in Lauderdale County and is buried at Wesley's Chapel Methodist Church. But anyway, after the meeting with Beauregard, Bert Hayes and the men of Company H began a harassment of the Union sympathizers in the area, and in the area of Hardin, McNairy, and Wayne County in Tennessee, and here in Lauderdale County, Alabama, and the northeast corner of Mississippi. One of the favorite units to harass was the 2nd Tennessee Mounted Infantry Unit, or Home Guard, also known as the Clifton Shebang in Booger Saga, or the Buttermilk Rangers in another reference, who were stationed at Clifton to guard the river approach and to provide some form of military control over Wayne and Hardin counties. In June of 1863, Colonel Cornyn of the 10th Missouri Cavalry, USA, with a Captain Eggleton Carmichael of the 15th Illinois Cavalry, were sent on an expedition into the area of Lauderdale County and Wayne County. Cornyn's main unit came on into Florence, but Carmichael's group was dispatched to go up and destroy the mills and crops and any other supplies that were currently available in the Martin's Mills, Houston area of Wayne County, Tennessee. I was told by a Mr. Bloney Tackett of Savannah in 1984, 5, somewhere in through there, at a meeting at the library in Savannah, the story of what Bert did. Mr. Tackett's grandmother was a Catherine Tackett who lived about where the Colonel Jacob Biffle farm was down on Indian Creek. And she, to put it bluntly, was a lady of the evening. Anyway, he told me that Bert and company fanned out up Indian Creek and Weatherford Creek, which is a tributary, from the millside at Houston, and warned all the women to get to the mills to collect as much meal and flour as they could carry in their aprons or any other thing they could get, because he knew Carmichael was going to burn the mills and all of the stockpiled corn, ground corn meal, and flour, and also all of the cloth from the spinning mill and weaving mills that were there. On a side note, this expedition is of interest because Houston was the home of Colonel Jacob B. Biffle of the 9th Tennessee Cavalry, or 19th Tennessee Cavalry, CSA, under General Forrest. It is fortuitous that the expedition did not occur later in the year, since part of Biffle's command was in winter camp on his farm in Houston, although Biffle and the majority of his command was elsewhere. If I remember my dates correctly, they were at Murfreesboro, Stones River. According to tradition, Bert and company were involved in the Holland's Creek battle sometime in late 63 or early 1864. According to the account published by Tony Hayes in his book, On the Banks of the Tennessee River, A History of Hardin County, published in 1996, the battle raged up and down the creek all morning between Hayes's group, some of the civilians that were there, that were Union sympathizers, and a couple of Union soldiers who were home on furlough. He states one account states that 10 men were killed before the shooting had ended. I have found no record of this battle ever taking place. Berton Company were also involved in the Battle of Bryce's Crossroads in June of 1864, according to OR record, serving with distinction. On July the 7th, 1864, Brigadier General John C. Starkweather from Pulaski, Tennessee, sent a dispatch to Captain Gardner, the Assistant AG in Decatur, concerning the reports of his scouts who had returned from Corinth, Mississippi. And I'd like to read a little of that with your permission, if I can read it. Captain C.T. Gardner, Assistant Adjutant General, Decatur. My scouts who have been absent for so long just got in from Corinth, Bethel, etc. Colonel William A. Johnston, commanding at Corinth, has 3 regiments and 1 battalion cavalry there. Forrest has his main forces at Tupelo. Roddy is with him. Roddy was to take command at Corinth, and Johnson was to return up valley to near Tuscumbia. State Guard at Savannah had a skirmish with Bert Hayes's guerrillas. 5 companies of Roddy's command at or near Tuscumbia. Our gunboats were up as high as Waterloo last week. Enemy have boats at Eastport at the mouth of Bear Creek. Enemy say that Nashville is the point they tend to aim for. Have taken 4 large droves of cattle out of the country and am continually collecting them. My scouts were captured by 25 of Forrest's command 9 miles southwest of Lawrenceburg today. Have sent out a scout after the enemy. That gives you a good idea of what was happening here in this area without the battles going on. The various commanders were sending out scouting troops, the Union commanders and the Confederate commanders, to take charge of as much stock and as much fodder and as much food as they could. The Confederacy was the best, most stressed bunch of all, because they did not have the actual finances and stockpiles of food for their troops. That was one of the problems with Hood's invasion of Tennessee. He ran out of ammunition, he ran out of food, and the troops ran out of clothing. It's not reported or recalled what part Bert Hayes and company played during John Bell Hood's invasion of Tennessee in November, December 1864. That he could have rendered scouting aid to Hood's forces is undoubtable, but there is no official record of his involvement. In a dispatch from Major General Edward Hatch on the 13th of May, 1865, Hayes and company are reported to have surrendered at Eastport, Mississippi. Bert's forces were paroled at the end of the war and they returned home. But the violence did not end. Union soldiers and others who had a grievance with Bert and his group were hell-bent on delivering justice for outrages committed by the group during the war. And Hayes himself was also a participant in delivering justice he thought necessary against those who had tortured his father and stepmother during the war and afterwards. Several criminal cases were brought against Bert Hayes and others, members of his gang, in the 1866 to 1868 period in the Circuit Court of Hardin County. Some of these were cases that were brought against those who had given refuge to Hayes and his gang. One, the state of Tennessee versus Daniel Say and Lee Howell for harboring guerrillas. Then in 1867, another, William B. Hayes, later this county yeoman, was on or about the 1st of July, 1867 in Hardin County and at divers other times and places before and since, by common knowledge a highway robber, brigand, and guerrilla, and was in the habit of making inroads upon peaceable inhabitants of said state for the purpose of plunder and by force deprive them of their property, and by the alarm caused by his being armed, when in fact he was not at the time a soldier and not reporting to an authority. Daniel Say, on 1 July 1867, fed the robber. The next entry, charges brought against Howell for harboring guerrillas, William B. Hayes and Dr. Milligan, late of said county. On March the 1st, 1867, and at other days and times, fed and entertained them at his house. Another entry, the State of Tennessee versus W.B. Hayes, the Attorney General stated he no longer wished to prosecute the case. And in March of 1868, the charges against Howell were dropped. Bert Hayes was shot and killed on the 2nd of June, 1868. There are 5 or 6 different stories floating around about who killed him, where he was killed, and how he was killed. I believe the best one is the one that states that he was shot and killed on Main Street in Savannah on the 2nd of June, 1868, by a man by the name of Jim Thomas, whose brother had been a member of Tom Clark's gang. This is the one that is repeated the most amongst the family, and is also the one that is told by more of the relatives that live in the Hardin and McNairy County area. Whether or not Thomas was hired to kill Hayes, or was operating on his own, he may have been a member of the Hayes gang who had a falling out with Hayes. The family never recovered from the depredations of the war and being associated with Bert Hayes and crew. Many of them moved in the year following the war from Hardin County to Texas, Arkansas, and elsewhere. I do know that in Wayne County, Tennessee in 1867 or 68, a consortium of Masons, ministers, government officers, and the members of the William P. Kendrick camp of the Grand Army of the Republic sponsored agricultural fair at the Methodist campground at Houston on Indian Creek in Wayne County. The agricultural fair drew a large crowd from Wayne County and Hardin County. The members of the consortium moved through the crowd during the fair and issued the following warning. You can live here in peace, abiding by the law, or you can go to Texas, Arkansas, or the West. But if you continue to break the law and the peace of the county, you'll be hanging from one of these trees. In the following year, many people and families disappeared from Wayne County and Hardin counties in Tennessee, headed west, lock, stock, and barrel. I found no evidence of any Ku Klux Klan involvement in this consortium, although there was a reference to it in an article that was published in one of the Tennessee historical quarterlies years ago. And it's not referenced in Joe Park's biography of General Nathan Bedford Forrest. I heard this story from the former county historian of Wayne County, Tennessee, 50 years ago. And there is no record, as far as I know, either published or available in written form about it. I do know, though, that most of the boogers that were left, or the guerrillas, packed up and left post haste, because they meant what they said about hanging from the tree. And I thank you for listening to my rambling on and on about this. This is the old Lenore Cantrell house at Walnut Grove. This picture was made in 1982 or 3, and it's out of focus on the photograph. It's not my copy of it. The house is no longer there. It was built about 1840 and was the home of his wife's sister-in-law, and is also, or rather his wife's aunt, Eleanor Cantrell. And after Hayes was shot and killed, it was maybe 8 years Later, his wife died, and his children were all sent to Aunt Eleanor to take care of, and also sent to various other members of the family. But I know that Bert frequented this house during the war, and according to some information I found early this morning, Eleanor was continually harassed by Union scouts coming through the area and Union sympathizers because they knew Bert was connected to her through family. Now let's see if I can get the next one open. In recent years, someone in the family has put up a military marker for Bert Hayes. He's buried in the Johnson Cantrell Cemetery, which is just west of the Cantrell House. And the first time I visited the cemetery back in the 70s, there was just a small fieldstone marker there that did not have any identification. So it had to have been somebody in the family who erected the marker. But all of that area looks different. It's changed in the last 50 years. The last time I went through there, I couldn't find anything that I recognized. Except the old Walnut Grove School is still there.